I'll get this out of the way out front. Elden Ring is possibly my favorite From Software game yet. I'm gonna have to simmer on this for years to come, but it's looking really good based on a full completion and change. One of the biggest selling points of Elden Ring is that it's an actually engaging open world. So many open world games have become bloated messes, mere parodies of the genre. Pins upon pins upon pins, with tie-ins and companion apps. It's ridiculous in some cases. But Elden Ring feels complete, in the sense that discovery is paramount before reaching marked destinations for small dopamine hits. I constantly found myself looking off in the distance and becoming fixated with finding out how to get somewhere. The Elden Second Soulsborne, that's a coined term, spirit is alive and well. Dead bodies in ornate chairs and the hubris of royalty is still a mood, and a unique one in the landscape of games. While the story is still very low-key at times, I enjoyed the effort to pack in more lore via textual ruins, as it's way easier to piece things together that are actually in the game and not in an interview or on a wiki. It's also true to form in other ways. Small caves leading into big areas is a big part of Elden Ring's DNA. Caves you may miss entirely on your first playthrough, but there are also super obvious landmarks to visit in an organic way simply by coming across them. As you start to weave together routes, locations of secret merchants, and faraway points of interest, the game really comes alive. Running into a convoy of enemies and figuring out how or where to approach them is a unique thrill that's inherent to From Software games, but it feels bigger in scope because of the fabric in which Elden Ring is comprised. The series has undergone some changes, mostly for the better in the quality of life department. At one point, I had wandered around the map for a while without checking the navigation screen. I stumbled into a tomb, I got ambushed, and I died. When I was prompted to resurrect, I had the option to head to a checkpoint called a Stake of Marika, presumably near that tomb, or the Last Site of Grace, a bonfire. I chose the former, found myself very close to my body, and got my runes. Think Souls and other games. Some may call parts of Elden Ring easier on paper, but I just see it as convenient. It doesn't feel easier, at least. The marking where you need to go breadcrumb mechanic that was announced when the game was revealed isn't that descriptive. While NPCs do give you vague hints of what area to go to and glowing arrows point to places of interest, not all of them are going to be story or critical path locations. On one occasion, I spent a few hours trekking through an area with a marker, and it turned out to be completely optional. Because the game is so big and things can feel so aimless, adding a convenient mount on top of the other quality of life features is a genius move, because Elden Ring wouldn't work nearly as well if it was more rigid. Instant fast travel is a godsend, especially for quests that ask you to immediately about face and head back down the same path you just ran through. Testing it out on a PS5 made this process even smoother, as loads were near instant. The technical and design advancements actively encourage more exploration without the contrivances. The Stakes of Marika, which function as little checkpoint fires for boss fights, make repeat attempts more fun and quicker too. Galloping around on a horse and jumping are two small things that I take for granted in a lot of other games, but here they're even more appreciated. It's really addicting, meandering about the map and trying to jump up to get a better view of everything. Again, it's all organic. When exploring, I would often use higher ground to find a legitimately cool looking or interesting area, mark it on the map, and then go to it. It's not too gamey or cynical. No joke, I spent hours roaming around in between story bosses, and you know what? It even has a low-key marker/stamp system to draw your own personal map. I didn't even find the option to trigger stamps until my second playthrough. The map is far bigger than expected, going beyond the limits of what the screen shows you at first. You're constantly coming across new stuff because exploration is so expansive. There are some gates, think keys you need to get into specific areas, but by and large you can explore nearly the entire map. Finishing a story boss will lead you to the next area by default, or you can sometimes sneak there using a hidden path and sequence break, to a point. If you're worried about a lack of traditional areas, don't be. There are plenty of massive deliberate zones, just like the old games. That said, some of the open world stuff isn't as exciting as I'd like. Micro dungeons can get derisive, much like the Chalice layouts in Bloodborne. There's tiers of said dungeons, from ruins, which are glorified treasure chests, to dungeons, think Chalice, to caves, usually with weapon enhancing materials, and so on. Some of them are a cut above and more clever with unique layouts and puzzles, but those are typically found near the end of the game. There is, however, a very cool take on subterranean map design that I won't spoil here, that makes up for it. When I was at the foot of the final boss, I went back and found 15 hours of more stuff to do, and didn't exhaust it all. The 40 hours or more mark for the first playthrough is roughly what a lot of people are looking at, erring on the side of more. In fact, on my second playthrough, I found at least 10 things I hadn't done before in the first 5 hours of that next go around. The scope should encourage multiple playthroughs more than any other past From Software title. And yet, the open world changes nothing in terms of the heart and soul of Elden Ring. A mini-boss can still pop out and wreck you harder than the required boss you're on your way to fight. NPCs can die due to unforeseen story machinations. Some of you are probably thinking, that's stupid, why is it still around? But the Souls fans out there are rubbing their hands together in excitement. We do this discourse every time From Software releases something. It's occasionally frustrating, but always exciting and unpredictable for a large group of people, myself included. I'm still thinking about a few of the game's puzzles and even took physical notes this time because of how much there was to track. Combat gets a lift from a more open loadout system. Mixing and matching playstyles and weapon types is super easy, and making your own potion to suit your needs is peak Elden Ring customization. From a mechanical perspective, most of the weapon types feel precise, and on PS5, I had no real technical complaints. There are too many individual facets to talk about, but the amount of freedom I felt was overwhelming at times. Instead of just pumping stats into a character like so many other light RPGs, I put some actual thought into how I wanted to approach everything. That includes weapon modification, what abilities to imbue, and what armor pieces to wear. Summoning NPCs as a magic spell is an insane upgrade for solo players, both now and forever, as long as this game exists and servers become less populated. Crafting, while rote in many other games, feels natural here, because the items you can craft actually matter to some builds, or you can ignore it entirely. A fully fledged multiplayer component, which has everything from PvP to PvE in one place, could ensure that Elden Ring's legacy will live on as long as the other Souls games have. Again, it's a long time coming, but it came all the same. So many challenges are optional that it not only funnels into that aforementioned genuine sense of discovery, but it also feels like you choose how difficult you want the game to be. Sure, there are roadblocks in the sense that the critical path encounters lead to new areas, potentially new items and upgrades and better places to farm or level up. Some of those gates are going to be annoying if you want a constant sense of story progression. Heck, I even felt the pang of linearity near the end of the game as things were starting to wrap up and funneling into a pointed series of boss fights. Given how much Elden Ring encourages you to sit back and enjoy it, it was never truly an issue for me, because I could take a break and go explore somewhere else. It also doesn't sacrifice the core Souls loop of overcoming challenges and the sense of accomplishment that hits you like a ton of bricks afterwards. Yes, that setup isn't for everyone, but I also think that Elden Ring is one of the most accessible From offerings yet from a skill floor perspective, while catering to everyone who's been along for the ride this whole time. To say I was blown away by Elden Ring is an understatement. Sure, it's going to appear esoteric and unapproachable to a subset of people. There are things it could still do better in terms of onboarding, and it could do even more on the front of quality of life enhancements for returning Souls players. But as an experience, it's one of the most wondrous and open-ended games I've played in years. It has so much to say from a design perspective that people will be talking about its choices for years on end, and playing it for even longer. Thanks for watching today's review. If you liked it, please remember to like and subscribe. To see a written version of this review, more game reviews, or game news, head on over to Destructoid.com.